Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon from Void Radio, and today we have a very special guest with us.
I'm Gerald, Guy Called Gerald, from Manchester, Moss Side, England, Great Britain.
But you travelled down from London today, I
But
believe.
that's where I'm from. I actually live in London.
Yeah, yeah. How was the journey down?
Oh, really relaxing. It was really chilled out. I couldn't find any kind of problem. In fact, I think I just fell asleep like when we stopped. The first time we stopped. So
Yeah.
relaxing trains. I wish I could take the train everywhere.
I mean, you've got a good experience of GWR. Usually,
Yeah.
a lot of us have a bit of problems with delays, but you weren't too delayed
It
today.
wasn't too delayed.
Too
But
delayed.
like, what if you've got something to do, like, I was just like there, like programming stuff on the computer and stuff. So, and then I just fell asleep, woke up, I had
L-
to pack my stuff away, kind of. So,
Lovely
yeah,
jubbly.
very
Well,
nice.
thank you for obviously joining us.
No
You've
problem.
been in Bristol recently as well.
I have,
Jam
yeah,
Jar back in November.
yeah, yeah, very nice.
Also touching down in Beacon as well in 2019 and a Motion gig in 2015. I'm wary that's obviously quite a couple of years
My
ago. Is
memory
but
doesn't stretch that
my
back.
first sort of question for you is your experience of Bristol and playing
Yeah,
it. How's that been?
very nice, very kind of interesting place. I pause when I say interesting because I'm thinking of things that have happened to me in the past here. I've got friends who live here where we've been. I've been to their house and I'm like, is there anywhere we could go out? And they're like, we'll just go down the pub. And I'm like, pub. Ah. And then I get to the pub. We're at the pub having a drink, and I'm like, I can hear music coming from somewhere. I go in the back, and there's a full-on rave going on in the back of the pub. And I'm like, this could never happen in London. You'd just be thrown, the pub will just shut, like there's just so many. I mean, I'm sure it's going to start happening here a little bit because it's happening everywhere.
Yeah,
Happening
yeah.
everywhere. There's like this noise complaints thing, but it was just great. It was just like, it was amazing. And there's a few other times I've been here where I've had like similar experiences where there's been things that you wouldn't happen anywhere else. It kind of reminded me of old school Manchester in a
Yeah,
way. It's like Manchester in the 80s,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
how it used to be where, people were actually kind of friendly to you creating music and stuff like that. Whereas, yeah, now, and I remember once I came here, um, and I went out with a friend somewhere. We ended up at someone's house, and basically people were reciting poetry. And
It's the city of arts. It is
I
the
was
city
like,
of arts. A lot of
I was
arts
like, did
going
you
on
make
there.
that up yourself? And it was like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. And then like somebody else would like chirp in on something, and then like somebody else would, we were all sat there, and I'm like, okay, I've got to think of something to.
Did you come up with something?
uh, kind of, but it wasn't like something I'd came up with off the top of my head. It was
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that I'd from an old track of mine, kind of thing.
Oh,
So,
lovely, lovely.
but yeah, it was nice to be kind of in that energy. Creative people who are just doing stuff and feeding off each other, kind of thing.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so on that note, what do you look forward to the most when you come back here?
Um, realness, realness, like proper, like you know, like how it used to be in the rest of certain parts of England that are kind of trying to be London in a way. It seems to me, anyway. I'm like from this place where, I mean, the streets were kind of like, being built up and people were still doing things, but you get this feeling that, everyone was kind of like in it together. You know what I mean? We weren't like looking up in like the skyscrapers and like wishing that we were like this kind of, what I mean? People were actually, so I kind of miss that.
Yeah.
I miss that. We don't get too much of that.
Yeah. So you've actually drawn on some things there, similarities between Manchester,
Yeah.
London,
Yeah.
and Bristol, and obviously the differences as well.
Yeah.
How would you say those sort of major cities, and I see them as quite major clubbing cities in the UK at the moment,
Yeah.
how would you see that they're sort of similar in ways?
Um, well, they've got, yeah. I mean, I guess there's kind of spirits to certain places, um, and Manchester, like here, I think there's like this heavy kind of thing with students studying. So there's a heavy and like so you get this real mixture of people. So you get like a pot of things cooking and brewing, especially in the creative kind of areas of things. So like, you could go out to a club. I remember in Manchester in the 80s, you go out to a club kind of thing, like kind of studenty kind of club, not like these Saturday Night Fever clubs. It was
Mm.
like kind of just like a kind of crossover between like a youth club and a posh club. And it was like these places where, you would go and like, there would be like popular bands at the time would come and perform and stuff like that. And if you had a student union card, like which I faked to get in, no, you could at the time you could get into like these places and places like the hacienda kind of were built out of that type of place where it just became like a melting pot of all these different people who were interested in similar things and like so like they'd group together, I think in them days because like a lot of the popular music would have been kind of like post punkish type
Yeah.
stuff.
Bit
So
new romance as
a
well
little
thrown in
bit,
there.
yeah, coming out of that and into all these, there's so many things back then. You know what I mean? It was just so kind of like there would have been like reggae, like early hip hop, electro, funk, punk, funk, bit of like jazz fusion. There was all these things kind of like that would be happening at any one time in any one space.
Yeah.
It wasn't really this specialized kind of thing, and it wasn't really a DJ scene. I mean, DJs were about, but like basically they were basically just there to play the music
Yeah.
that musicians had made. Not like, they weren't being celebrated as the core of the production of the music,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like they would be, they were there to be heard and not seen.
Sort of facilitate the night
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
way. Yeah, yeah.
Not even that important, I remember there was this club in Manchester called Legends, where there's this guy, I think like a lot of people know him now, Greg Wilson, but
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was he was like just like a kind of junior DJ who actually used to um like he was interested in people knowing his music. So he used to basically put like a fax, like not fax, what was it, photocopy. He
Yeah.
would photocopy his playlist and you could actually go up to him and get a copy of the music that he was going to play that night.
Useful idea for these times, isn't it? Instead of leaning
It was
over the DJ
yeah,
booth,
yeah. So
maybe we should
you
be
could
doing
just
that.
you could just give it. He would give you a copy of the playlist of what he was doing. And it was really really cool because you
Yeah.
got to know, and there wasn't that many tracks. Like as in now there was like there's like 15 million tracks, and then there's 10 million remixes of the remix of the remix. So we knew all the tracks anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
and in a way it was really nice because it was how they were actually mixed in, which became the performance,
Yeah.
and like the story was like it could be like um like I don't know, let's say nothing's going on but the rent mixed in with somebody else's guy, or like, and but it'd be just like the way that when they would be a play off on the words, and like and the way that things would be kind of it was a very interesting skill. And I think I learned a lot from that when it came to sampling, and like when it came to actually sourcing material to sample. I would actually go for a lot of spoken word stuff. So I would find myself like digging through like these old like record kind of collections in like these backstreet shops in Manchester. I remember there was a shop called Yanks, and like they had like all this really obscure old stuff. And then when I couldn't find like that stuff there, I would just go to the Manchester Polytechnic music library. And at the time, I wasn't old enough to join the music library, so I would just go in and kind of like s- slip stuff under my coat and take it out, forget to bring it back because
Conveniently.
I was too young. But like, yeah, it kind of made me. It brought me outside of like wanting to listen to kind of just regular like Duran Duran and Adam and the Ants and this kind of stuff that was going on at that time, and more into who else was Miles Davis playing music with kind of
Mm,
vibe. So I kind of went down that route, like when I was pretty well in my teens and kind of like got really curious about like that. And then like I realized there was all these other little veins of music that came off that, like that were really interested in, like, then then some of it even made a loop where there would be like, things like David Bowie and Prince and all these other people, and like, I'd actually like learned that Jimi Hendrix existed from listening to like this music. I never grew up with
yeah,
rock
yeah.
music, you see.
Okay, yeah, fair
So
enough. I wanna go into that actually. Was it like growing up as a Jamaican Mancunian?
um very interesting.
Mm,
I mean, like, I think I had a freedom that a lot of people didn't have because I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe people of who have grown up with parents who are not from the country that they actually were born in, and they realize that they have this kind of upper hand over their parents when they
yeah,
become,
yeah, yeah.
but just before they become teenagers, and when so like I could do all this stuff that a lot of other friends weren't able to do because their parents were too aware of the surroundings and what was going on. So like, yeah, we kind of built our own kind of reality in a way, like when, we created like dance crews and like, all, we did all this stuff from when we were pre-teens, like we grew up in a kind of Moss Side kind of was almost like a no-go zone for the police and stuff like that from when we were really young. So we kind of grew up in this land of, it was, people from the outside would have been dangerous, but like for us, it was just kind of
Yeah.
like a weird kind of like where if there was an empty house, we would just like knock the door off and go inside and make it into our den kind of vibe. But
Yeah.
then, and we would there would be other things like we would just, like grab like a load of firewood and stuff, like anything that was loose. We would like, there was like loads of wasteland. So like anything that was loose, we had this thing about building like these big fires, like even outside of like bonfire night, we would do it. I mean, bonfire night was like Christmas, but like like we had this thing where we would kind of grab all these old chairs and furniture and couches and just pile them up and then just burn them.
Yeah. Kids these days,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have no clue, do
That
they?
was that was our excitement. I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was kind of crazy, and like, but yeah, like it was just like, how's this gonna burn? How's that gonna burn? And we get all these old things, and but then like, I would like, just from rooting around in this old stuff. I remember finding like old televisions and things, and then like learning how to take the speakers out of the
Blimey.
TVs, and
Yeah.
like, like learning about, and then there's all these like multicolored wires and stuff like, and I was like, oh, what's that? What's this one? How that works? It's like not just a little man in the telly, is it?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So all these, so yeah, I kind of, just from doing that, I got really kind of curious about these other things. As other kids were running around playing football and stuff, I was like, what's this? And like, I wonder what would happen. And like, and I would find like old calculators and stuff. Like back then, calculators looked like typewriters. And I remember like once getting this calculator thing, and it didn't have a plug on it. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I just put these two plugs, no, these two wires, like in the socket. I think it was red and black. I can't remember at the time. Um, and like, you plug them in and it blow up. But then if you plugged them in the other way,
It would.
like it wouldn't blow. So I was
Yeah,
like, ah.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
it came on this calculator thing. I was like, oh my god! It's like, it was like really it was very early kind of like LED kind of display on this thing, and I was like, oh wow, I've made it work. I fixed it, kind of thing. And then from then, I just got really interested in grabbing bits of old machines and things and trying to reanimate them.
Stitch them all together and
Uh,
everything. Okay, yeah, fair enough then. Talk to us about obviously that and starting music
yeah,
and where you started. So obviously you touched on, going to these nights and everything, being
yeah.
really sort of inspired by what you were seeing there, going into the sampling. But what first got you going in music?
Um, what got me going in making the music, I think, was basically we would get these old records, well, these records from the library, and on the back of these records, some of them, like especially like Herbie Hancock records and Chick Corea records, they would have like the instruments, a list of the instruments that were played, mini moog, arp odyssey, micro moog, like all these, and we was like, wow, like that's amazing, because like we was so into the music and like
Mm.
into dancing, but like we was just got so into the music that we were like, when I say we, that's me and my brother. Like we kind of got like, okay, so like that's that instrument, that's this instrument, and so we could hear, so we in our heads before we even knew anything about multi-tracking or anything, we could hear where the instruments were, where the drums were, and
Mm.
on in this music, and there's this like music shop which was down the road from like where we lived called A1 Music, and in the basement, they had like these synthesizers and stuff like that, really old
Wow.
school synthesizers. And like, I mean, I wouldn't have let us in the shop, but they let us in. Like, I remember it was like Tony and Anne. I remember these people who owned this shop, and we would just go down in there like maybe on a Saturday, and we'd maybe go down at like about, I don't know, like 12 o'clock, and we wouldn't leave there until 5. When they kicked us out, they
Wow.
would be like, "Come on."
Just playing around with
Yeah,
them
yeah.
or going through
Just
records
just
and
no records, it's just instruments.
oh, it's just instruments.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just old synthesizers and stuff, and like, so we would plug them in and like, try and imitate like Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
do
yeah.
it, play on these keyboards, and like they just, they let us. That's crazy. I mean, like I would have never. So hats off to these guys for like,
Yeah,
like
fair
letting
enough.
us do this in the shop. And at first, I think when we very first were going in there, they would have been like, 'cause we would have been like 11, 12, and like, they're like, why do they keep on coming back, kind of thing. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
but look, we was just so into it, and nobody else was going down there or into it, and I just kind of, I think that's what kind of drew me into it. It was
Mm.
just like, it was like almost like a little closed off kind of world where you could go and like, in a um we didn't know anything about sample. I mean, like samplers didn't really exist. I think the S16 Akai was the very first sampler that I actually saw
Mm.
that in that shop. But that was like top shelf stuff. So it was upstairs, it wasn't downstairs with the old synths and stuff like that. But so yeah, that was so for us. That was the kind of route we had, the music, and then we had means to kind of try to imitate that music because we had access to these synthesizers and stuff. Um, and then we started listening to like the jazz funk and stuff like that. A lot of the early stuff with the 808 like drum machine was kind of like a lot of the early soul and funk and the electro was from this machine.
Yeah, yeah.
So like say like would have been like 83, 84 kind of thing. And so yeah, I remember seeing like this drum machine. I mean we didn't know what it was. I mean, like we definitely knew it wasn't a keyboard because it didn't have keys. Um and like when I plugged it in and I pressed the cowbell, I knew the sound
Yeah,
already.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and then the bass drum and the snare, and it was just like this is that machine, the machine that we've like at the time, like nearly every track had this this
This sound
this
to it.
sound. So it was just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
so like for me, it just had this instant value. It had nothing to do with like like acid house and stuff like that was still a few like years away.
Mm.
This was just like, oh my god, this machine has got like all these. It's the sound of it was the sound of the 80s
Yeah,
basically,
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and I kind of like by then like we started this crew called the Scratch Beat Masters, and like we were challenging all these other kind of DJ crews, graffiti artists, breakdancers that started to do stuff. Um, as in like sound system style. Yeah, no, because we kind of still had this sound system mentality. So like we would meet at like a youth club or something and organize like a kind of sound off, cutting and scratching and stuff like that. Um, and so we used to do these routines, like where we were cutting and scratching, um, and like it was like one person on. We had this routine where one person would be doing the bass drum on one turntable, and the other one was doing a snare on the other, and then we had a MC like on the microphone
Yeah, yeah.
doing like this rapping stuff, and so we would create all this our own music basically. But like when I seen this drum machine, it was just like, how the hell can I get this drum machine kind of thing?
Incorporated.
It was my like kind of basically my entire life basically just focused on like, how I could get, like somehow earn money to buy this machine
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Tony and Ann. I was like, like so I think like by the time I'd kind of it was like 1980 85, 86, something like that. I'd kind of found a way to. I started working at McDonald's basically, and I found a way to get this machine or put money down on it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
in
yeah.
the end, I got it. And like, yeah, after that, everything was just like, build my own studio, build my own speaker boxes, and like, just it was like basically build your own shit. There was nothing, there was no infrastructure for anything. You know what I mean? Like our guide was like the radio show that came on Sunday on Piccadilly Radio,
Yeah, yeah.
and the import shop spinning records and music from the library, local library. And then after that, we used to go trekking looking for record shops. Like we walked from Manchester to Macclesfield because we found out that there was a
Blimey.
record shop in Macclesfield. Yeah, it was just like there's nothing else, just music. Like,
Yeah.
like digging in crates, like from day one basically. And then like getting involved in like the electronic side of stuff, like wanting to know how to build our own mixer, like building we built our crossfader, a transformer switch for making like this transformer sound for scratching.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think the other, there was like really exciting inventions for us. I mean, like putting a dimmer switch on the motor to try and create like a pitch control.
Oh, wicked. So,
um,
so all of this putting TVs back together and everything, you use those practical skills to sort of set
yeah,
up that
yeah,
infrastructure
yeah, yeah,
around you.
yeah.
Wicked, wicked. W-
And we didn't. We didn't even have solder. We were basically just twisting like wires together, like stripping the bare wire and then just twisting it together on certain
Yeah, yeah,
things
yeah.
to create like. I remember um like basically buying like enough equipment, way too much equipment that then I had plugs. So I used to just strip the plugs off and like twist the wires together. So I'd have like maybe 3 or 4 like instruments plugged into one socket, but without a plug.
Blimey.
I used to do this like all the time, and
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't think it was dangerous even until I started working with like Graham from 808 State.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And then he said to me, "Oh, yeah, that's a little bit
Yeah. Please
dangerous."
stop doing that. You set the house on fire.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So you spoke about obviously you know, money for buying this equipment,
yeah,
which is still very much a today problem as well. I'm,
yeah,
I'm still waiting for an upgrade on my setup back at home.
yeah.
But also this infrastructure around you and that there wasn't that much. What other difficulties did you have when you initially started? Was that very much the most of them?
Yeah. Well, places to actually play. I
Yeah.
mean, like there was youth clubs and stuff like that where you could play and stuff. But like, yeah, we would basically be most of the time was jamming at my house, like in the attic, and like yeah, I guess after a while we kind of outgrew that space, because I mean I had like this, like what back then would have been like a massive concert system for us. We had like two 15-inch, no, it was like two 18-inch like speakers, and then on top of that we had two 15-inch subs, and then on top of the subs we had four 12-inch speakers in a box, and then on top of that four 12s we had like a horn, like for the treble and stuff,
Yeah.
like one of these at each side of the room, kind of thing, then
Blimey.
plugged into like this kind of amplifiers that we'd kind of rigged together out of old amps. So like we kind of decided that like if we plug that amp into this amp, it's going to be more powerful than if we just use the one amp kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it was going from amp to it was just like, we had no internet, nothing, like no way of knowing like if it was just basically touch and go if anything was going to work.
Yeah. Very DIY.
Yeah, very, very.
Yeah.
And then like we had also Maplin's, this shop called Maplin's that had like loads of cables and stuff, so we could get like cables from Maplin's, and the building site where we would get the wood for, for building like stuff like the decks, for the decks for the turntables and the boxes for the speakers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Were built from like reused, because I mean I'm sure that they would have had other use for it on the building site, but we
One house is being built without a door, thanks to you.
Kind of take this stuff and build our own things, because I mean like we had this sound system. I mean, like, there were sound systems around us, so like we had this kind of mentality of like these sound systems, and like there was a sound system that only did like reggae and dub, called Yabby U, and like there was a bloke from there who basically used to give me his old speakers, and that's how I got the speakers to build my own kind of sound system.
Your own rig, yeah, awesome.
So it was just like whatever we got together, we'd just basically. It was like we were like the Wombles, basically. Like we just like run around looking for old bits and pieces to string this stuff together. But it worked. It worked. And it worked. And the music was kind of the same in the end and all. It was just like little bits from here, little bits from there. I mean, like when the sampler was invented, it was like a dream. I was just like, oh my God. Like, you can have all this stuff, like put it all in the same place. And, I mean, like we had to kind of beat match things constantly and do all this, but like, with the sampler, it just meant like you could like have like this one thing, and then like you could put it on tape and then go back and record something else. And I mean, it was still touch and go with a lot of stuff, because you had to kind of keep on pressing it like that. You didn't have a sequence or anything, so but you'd press it in time, or even if it was out of time, you'd kind of somehow manage to, so that the next track that you used, you get to that part and it would be a little bit funny, but you'd make something over the top of it. So everything, even like the mistakes became creative. So you learn how to create from mistakes.
Yeah.
Which
Absolutely.
was like a really good school to, even for now. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I think back to one of my favorite tracks, "Strings of Life," Derek May.
yeah.
And towards the end, the keys like going out of time, but it sort of got that nice, genuine feel about it.
Everything's
and almost
played, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, you did try and keep, everything inside. I mean, I think in the back of our heads, we were kind of dreaming of like robots and like, all this kind of sci-fi kind of stuff. So you were kind of half trying to be like robotic when you was making the music, at first, you know. And then like, I suppose like once the kind of computer kind of thing kicked in, and like, more advanced sequences, like it was overplay, you know what I mean? Like, things just got a little bit too robotic and a little bit too, over kind of quantized, or they still, you know. So I mean, like it's really funny now. People trying to kind of humanize stuff still, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
I was going to touch on that actually, the main differences between then and now, especially when it came to sort of the barriers that you had. What would you say are the main sort of differences there?
Uh, I guess like the creativity wise, we didn't really. I mean, like we recognized loops
Mm,
and stuff like that, especially for like DJing. Like we would have like two of the same record, and you would cut it in the same place, and you learn how to kind of cut it, and you learn how to do this thing called a phase back, where you would like basically have exactly the same record but one beat apart, and then you with the crossfader or with the transformer,
yeah,
you
yeah.
would just like hit the hit it on beat, so it would sound like it was moving back one all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
So there's like little tricks like that that you could do and then record and then you go back to, and like things that were really and now really simple, were like really engineered back
Yeah.
then, like
Hands on.
playing like a beat in reverse.
Mm.
Like we used to put like a cup on a turntable and like turn the needle upside down and then turn the weight. This is when we got techniques in the end. We turn the
Yeah.
weight upside down and then play it from the inside out, and it would like basically play the track in reverse. But you would have to keep the record straight on top of the cup so it didn't
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was a skill. Like keeping
Blimey.
a floating record kind of thing. It's floating on top of a cup
Yeah.
basically. So you had to keep it, keep it straight, and at the same time, like not kind of touch it so it would lose tone,
Yeah.
kind of thing, And so like now you can just like flip it
Yeah.
like in the sampler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot easier.
A little bit, yeah. So I mean, like I still appreciate these things.
Yeah.
People go, "Oh no, it's like." I really, I mean, like we was using samplers with like a monitor like this size. It was like, and you basically only had like at the most a minute and a half of sample
Yeah.
time. So you would have to sample it like really fast and then slow it down, or like if you was sampling individual snares and stuff like that, you would basically just sample maybe half of the snare, and then like if you had a fade out thing on the like in the S 950 IKS 950, you had this fade out thing, so you could loop the end of it and fade it out, so it would give you the similar to the sound of the original snare
Mhm.
with the fade out, but you only use like half, maybe like you shave off a couple of milliseconds.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we used to work in milliseconds and
Just
shaving
to
things
save
off.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like the first time I ever seen something with 5 minutes of sample, it was just like, oh my god, this is like amazing. You could put like an entire. This was like I think 1991, 92. This company brought out this thing called Sound Tools. It
Mm.
was like the predecessor. It was like before Pro Tools, and like basically you could sample like 5 minutes of stereo sampling. You had 5 minutes of stereo sampling time that was non-destructible, and then everything changed for me. Everything changed because this first time I'd seen a waveform actually
On a digital
on a
screen.
on a screen,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
like you could actually see the sound, and it was so you knew where to edit, because where before we was just kind of using our ears and listening and like knowing like where to drop stuff in, like so like there's a lot of things that have kind of changed in a way. I mean, I still, even looking at this monitor with the waveform on it, like I really appreciate it still.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah.
30 years later, I'm still like, wow, look at
Yeah, because
look
I
at
guess
this.
you don't really deep that.
So my kind of take on technology is a lot different to people who were just basically used to just dragging and dropping loops in Ableton.
Mm.
Like I go really down the rabbit hole like on my stuff, and I really like messing around stereo imaging, and like I'm doing all, like I'll basically go through like the plugins one by one, and like I'll spend like hours on one thing still,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
little bits of instruments and stuff like that. And I'll try and make a track like a tapestry. I'll make it like really detailed, even just the background. I'll like really detail things, and I'll record it the same as where I was recording on tape. So I will do like a 5 minute take of just snare, and like adjust the snare all the way through for the 5 minutes, and like then I'll go back and do the bass drum, and you know, and it, I'll get like what I want at the end of the day, because like that 5 minutes
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
still gonna be that 5 minutes like 20 years later,
Yeah, yeah, true,
So
true. I suppose you've got the appreciation as well for how all the abilities this technology
yeah,
has evolved, and
yeah,
especially from, as you were saying, the cup on top
yeah,
of the
yeah,
vinyl to reverse
exactly. So
it,
like
like,
once you've it's almost like if I was gonna show someone now, like if I was gonna teach, if I was gonna go like to SAE or someone and teach someone to do something,
mm,
I would basically give them that wax on, wax off treatment,
yeah, yeah,
where I
yeah,
wouldn't just say, "Oh, there's a computer, sit down in front of it," because you're not going to appreciate. People don't. It's like, "Oh, it's computerized." They don't appreciate it. But like, if they had to actually build the sounds themselves, if I was to give you there's a tone, and there's an envelope, and there's like your attack, decay, sustain, release, and build me a snare. There's some white noise, like build the snare from that tone. Then like when when it comes, okay, I'll just sample that and put it in the sampler, and you start to appreciate it, and then
yeah, yeah,
maybe even as you go into the sample, oh, maybe as I sample it, I could just shave like using like envelopes in the sampler. I could like shave it and like make it to how I want it, actually sculpt the sound, and like that's the kind of thing that I guess is different
mm,
now. People, they're more used to presets, whereas before we saw presets like how I suppose DJs see like using the sync button.
yeah, yeah.
We saw using presets like that.
It's a no go.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, like listening to like some of the even like some of the from the late '90s, some of the hip hop stuff, and then going in. I remember going into this shop in New York called Sam Ash, and like playing this drum machine, and it was just like, oh my god, they just used like the actual beats from the drum machine without reprogramming. They just like, but
Interesting,
I
like
think
that.
by then they were all drinking like 40s and smoking blunts. So as long as they had the beat. And whereas I was used to like the earlier electro funk stuff, like the precursor to hip hop, where people were really trying to program like things. They were really, like they were programming like people like Arthur Baker. If you
Mm,
listen to the synthesis within some of the early kind of electro funk hip hop stuff, it was amazing. Like the stuff, they were splitting the drum machine out into like separate parts, and then treating each part of the drums like with its own effect, and like creating like pans and stuff like that. And I mean, like I kind of grew up on that stuff too,
mm,
whereas like later on, like hip hop just became they they really concentrated on the lyrics and like stuff like that, but when it came to the actual engineering side of things, they kind of slipped,
yeah, let
whereas
loose a
like
bit.
jungle we kind of took over on that side of things, where
Absolutely.
we started to detail the engineering, and like people could kind of like show off their skills within like the engineering of like how rhythms and beats were made and stuff. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah. I never forget like once there was uh, a a rapper. I can't remember what his name was now. Might have been African Islam or something like that. But like, anyway, he was saying that whereas this was in like the late '90s, he said to me that whereas as we have basically in the UK have kind of concentrated on the production to create like things like jungle and drum and bass, they were focused more on the lyrics and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, it's when you listen to the stuff from them times, they were really, you know, like freestyling wise, they were amazing. But like there was always over just like a loop,
Yeah. Just
you
a
know. It
simple
was just like
beat.
this, yeah,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
was
yeah.
nice. It worked because you see that you probably almost couldn't have like that kind of complexity in the beat, and you know, the beats kind of created the frame for the complexity of the lyrics that were being made. But
Yeah.
anyway,
No, wicked, wicked. I mean, you touched on jungle, and just before
yeah,
we hit the jungle, I just want to talk a bit about acid house,
yeah,
and obviously speaking on the sampler as well,
yeah,
Voodoo Ray.
yeah,
Just want to talk us through Voodoo Ray, obviously how
yeah.
that was made,
I
and
could do, yeah.
the interesting story about the sampler, and what could have been a different song name as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said earlier, like, you know, we were really kind of like very like purse pinching, for want of a better word,
Yeah,
when it came to like sample time and like what you could actually use and stuff like that. And basically with like, I mean, like Voodoo Ray was kind of like, that was, I would say, it was on a demo tape.
Yeah.
I used to do like these demo tapes for Piccadilly Radio.
Yeah.
In the end, when I had this little studio at home, so I would just basically do maybe like 5 or 6 tracks a day.
Yep.
And like Voodoo Ray was one of these tracks that I did, and I gave it to Stu Allen, who was the DJ at the time.
Of course,
on Piccadilly Radio.
Later went on to Kiss FM.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I used to give him these tapes all the time. I must have got on his nerves because, like, you know, he would just be like, oh no, this guy called Gerald's just giving me another tape, and like I would leave them at this record shop for him, and he would, you know, and then he played them on. I remember at the time I was working at McDonald's, and I remember hearing it coming on the radio, thinking, "Oh shit! Like he's playing my track. Like, fuck, you know, I can't believe it. He's playing my music." And that just inspired me then to you know, want to do more and stuff. Like someone heard like my music on the radio, and like basically at the time, I don't think like anyone especially in the UK, knew what a 303 was.
Yeah.
So like everyone was a little bit surprised that this stuff was coming out of the UK, and then out of Manchester. You know, like back then, like Manchester was like went from like jazz fusion, jazz funk to electro funk, and then from electro funk to acid house. This was like I've kind of seen this happen through like my own ears and eyes. This like basically they would like especially clubs like that Legends that I was saying earlier, they would play like the regular music for like the people to dance to, like SOS Band and all this kind of stuff, like soul-ish kind of, you know, like R&B-ish, early R&B-ish type music. And then in the middle of the night, they would have like what started out as the jazz break became the electro break, and then it went from being the electro break to the acid break in the middle of the night. And like basically it was a time where you got like the what you call, they weren't really professional dancers, but like the guys that turned up to the club with like a camera bag with talcum powder and like their bleached jeans with the phrase at the bottom and their spats and stuff. And like, you know, these people would basically be, I mean, like there's not a lot of people around now that would remember this. But these guys were like the warriors from whichever city he was from. There was some from down here. I can't remember the names, and there's some from Birmingham, from London, and like basically they would meet and challenge each other, and like that was in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
they would like basically meet, and like, you know, that was the main event for people like me, because like we were interested in how the dancers were dancing.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
You know, that's the dancing was the thing. We would travel all over the country to watch the dancers and to like sometimes take part in this
Yeah.
whole thing. This was outside of the music itself. I mean, like that I think for me, the music was kind of my little thing because it was like
Yeah.
I wanted to know how they danced, how each part. I mean, because like people would be taking up different instruments to express. Meanwhile, they were dancing. You know, can you imagine knowing the music that well that you would basically you would jump into the arena and like challenge someone and like basically like when a special part of that track came on that you kind of you knew you part of your basically your routine or whatever was showing people via like your movement how well you knew that
You
track.
knew that track. Yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so that's how I used to read music like that. It was through movement. So like when it came for me to make my own music, that's what I was imagining, like how people were going to dance to each separate part.
Yeah.
Or so I would like put elements that how I would dance to this and how I would dance to that. So Voodoo Ray kind of came out of that kind of vibe. You know, like, you know, there was like the heavy parts and then there was like lighter parts that would work in certain ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's basically breaking it down to what it was. But like technically, I had somehow acquired two SH101s, and like I had an 808 and 303, and I think I had a Korg, this other Korg kind of percussion machine. So I had percussion, drums, bass, and like lead and rhythm basically. And like I've found a way to sync everything together so I could just press because like the 808 was basically my sequencer.
Yeah.
So out of the back of the 808, there's three triggers out. So it was like modular in a way. So like one of the SH101s I would have coming out of the accent, the
Yeah.
trigger at the accent, and the other one would have been coming out of like the clap, and then I had a spare one for cowbell because I didn't really kind of use that. But like later on, I used three SH101s on some other things, some more techno things. But and then like there was a DIN out, which was like a DIN sync, which was going out to the 303. So you can imagine like each separate unit would have its own internal sequencer.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you can write whatever you want, but like everything would be in time.
And it all came beautifully
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
Wicked, wicked. So
yeah,
you spoke about it being played and being played for the dancers.
yeah,
Now, I've heard that one of the first times it was played out was Hacienda.
yeah. The very first time.
Was it the very first
Yeah,
time?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So where were you? Were you in
Yeah,
Hacienda
yeah,
at the
yeah, yeah.
time?
Basically, I went down
Yeah,
with
yeah.
like the test pressing.
Yeah.
I think it was like a test pressing, and basically went to up into the booth. I can't remember if it was Mike or Graham. It was either Graham or there was three actually. There was three DJs. It could have been John De Silva, Mike Pickering, or Graham Parker. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But what I remember was like they kind of it was just like, you know, they would have these stop and start things during the night. Can you imagine? Like it was before the whole kind of thing in a way.
Mm.
So like people would I remember they had this spin the wheel thing where they would like basically have this wheel and then they would spin it and then like where it stopped was like how many minutes they had at the bar to get a free drink. So like you know, we used the track first of all. I mean, like later on, you know, he played it like at another time, but
Yeah.
I gave him the test press. I can't remember exactly which one it was, so I gave the test pressing, but I gave it him, and so basically they put it on during this thing, and then like, you know, just played it for a little bit. Meanwhile, the thing was spinning, and as the wheel kind of slowed down, they kind of slowed the music down with it. But by the time it stopped, you know, everyone was over at the bar, so no one really. The very
Oh
first time, no one
no.
really heard it. But the after that, I think because I used to just go there every week and just like hang out in the lighting box. Actually, I didn't hang out in the DJ, but I
Yeah.
used to hang out in the lighting box, give the DJ space, and which I still think to nowadays I would never go up to a DJ and talk to them while they were playing.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
I always kind of respect like that, is letting them do what they're doing, you know. But anyway, so like I remember being there like maybe a few weeks later, and like you know by then I'd kind of like okay, like you know I've heard it in this club. I remember bringing it to Legends. I heard it in Legends, and I was you know all these different clubs around Manchester, and I think must have gone to the toilet, and then like I was just going back upstairs to the lighting box, and it came on, and I was just like, "Oh my god, it sounds mental!"
Yeah, yeah,
it was
yeah.
just like this really big, kind of hollow, kind of bass sound, which I actually had in mind for that place anyway, but it actually worked.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
actually how I was kind of envisioning it like as a bass sound in that space, it actually worked how I thought it was going to work, and I was just like, "Fuck!" But at the same time, everyone was going nuts, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
so yeah, it was nice. It was a nice feeling. It was like the very first time I actually heard it properly, and was like you know I had the teaser, and then when I heard it, it was just like, and then they used to feature it in there, you know, because like the sound was big and kind of it was like kind of warm in a cold space in
Mm,
a way. I mean,
mm.
it was like really cold sound. I mean, I used to call that bass sound the chisel bass because it was just like kind of like this blocky kind of metallic kind of sound.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just used to call it my chisel bass. Um, and yeah, it was absolutely amazing. Like, and then playing it live there, I played it live there, and like you know, it was even better because you could just like really kind of modulate that sound and make it kind of you know, like the goal was to try and make people hover,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
like
Certainly did, and it continues to do so as well. I
uh,
mean, that track especially is known as being like one of the pioneering tracks in the UK
yeah,
acid house scene.
yeah, it was way before anything else. That's why.
Did you realise
Um,
at the time?
Well, I basically what I was trying to do was make something that was kind of in a way similar to the stuff that I was hearing from Chicago and Detroit.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was kind of like a cross platform of them two places. Like they had their own sounds in a way. Um like the actual bass, the bass sound, that chisel bass was like basically me trying to imitate like a track by Kevin Saunderson called The Sound.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was trying
The
to create
sound, yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
that bass sound that he had, but like didn't have samplers. So I mean, and I wasn't actually gonna sample his bass sound anyway. You know what I mean? So even if I did have, so it was like I created my own using envelopes and frequencies and stuff. I basically just sculpted my own version of the sound of a track that was called The Sound.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually, so if you listen to The Sound by Kevin Saunderson, you'll hear where the root of where I kind of took like the energy of like the bass sound for Voodoo Ray.
Yeah.
The 303 in Voodoo Ray was basically like a version of like a Chicago track. I think it was called the Poke. I can't remember if it was called the Poke. I mean, back then there was so many things coming out of Chicago and Detroit, and there was so many artists. I mean, like if you list the artists today that had disappeared before the 90s,
Mhm.
there was just like this whole different world of like acid house music
Yeah.
that was around back then. Before, I mean, like when it kind of like by the 90s, it had kind of for me it kind of petered out. I mean, I started to do jungle in 1991.
Yeah. 91. Yeah. Yeah.
Because like I was over it. I was over like the whole like because like they just played it out. They just especially the 303 sample thing.
Mm.
They just sampled like the whole, and some of the early kind of rave kind of crews or whatever, um, and some of the early goer type people basically literally sampled like the whole of like Derek May's catalog, the whole of Kevin Saunderson's catalog, the whole of like Juan Atkins catalog, and I was like, oh God,
Yeah.
sacrilege. I mean, for me, it's the holy grail.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the techno, the building blocks of techno and house, and like basically listening to some of this early stuff. Where I mean, like back then, no one would have like they because the technology wasn't that like sampling technology people didn't know, but like I think now like because of the way it is, I mean you can actually hear like how they just grab blocks from these tracks and speeded them up, or they didn't like just take little bits, they were like, and I was like, man, like these people are so rich, they could just
Yeah.
use a whole sample.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, man, I was grabbing like little sections of bits and pieces and creating like my own tapestry kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was a bit, it was the early rave stuff for me was a little bit kind of like,
Too much.
stay away from that. And like, but like, then like when the whole thing of like speeding up old hip hop breaks and stuff came out, and then when I was just like, man, this is something else. Like rave kind of just basically transformed, you know what I mean? So I was kind of glad to be part of that transformation
Yeah.
because I'd already been through like the early kind of like hip hop and stuff like that. So like all these things basically being regenerated, and then like some of the old reggae B lines and stuff like that. It was just like, oh my God. And it was like just this then, they would somehow like the whole thing kind of started to fit, and then there was other things that kind of were part of like our kind of culture and growing up, like the post-punk kind of style of thing. So there was all this kind of stuff from like the post-punk world, like like that electronic side that kind of came into it, and all. So there was like hip-hop, reggae, electronic kind of music. And it all basically just gelled.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on top of that, then you had MCs, and it was just like, oh my God. Like, it's I didn't even look back after that. After like, I was just like, my head was just full of all these ideas from where you could take this thing, you know what I mean, and explore, so you could make it. I mean, like by the end of like the 80s, I guess, like the 303 sound for me was just like really played out. It was just like so kind of like everyone and his dog had basically used it, but like not appealing to someone who was seeing dance in an expressional way of movement, so
Yeah.
like like there was loops and loops and other loops, but there was nothing for me. It wasn't really grabbing onto it because I wasn't doing like the same kind of inebriance that other people were doing, so I didn't get what they were hearing. I was just like, man, like they're not, they basically taking blocks of stuff and they just basically just replaying the blocks. And I kind of like was like, bursting for because the technology was basically moving on, and it was like becoming, sampling times was becoming like more like it was becoming cheaper, and like the whole thing of like recording at home became a lot easier, and all, and it was just like, but like they just sampling blocks and using it, but then like jungle kind of started to emerge, and it was just like basically a use of everything within the technology.
Yeah.
Like it was like you could tell like when like the S1000, Akai S1000 came out because like it was Time Stretch all of a sudden, you know, and it happened at this, you know, so like that music was the cutting edge because it was like everything that was happening was basically a sound of like the latest technology,
Yeah, yeah,
which had kind of, I don't know if that had happened before in anything, but
before.
like it totally just it made so much sense and everything was balanced, you know, it all kind of, you know, like the home at the time when people were starting to do home recordings and stuff like that. Um, which I mean, for me at the time, I had like this real kind of disgust with like the major record label industry by then, and like being able to record your music at home and like basically give it to record a digital master and then give that directly to a DJ who could then cut it onto an acetate and play it in the club that same weekend.
Yep.
It was just like, fuck off, you fucking excuse the language, to the recording industry.
Yep.
You know, so like by the time Napster came along and CDs, I was just like, you know, I was in my element. I was just,
Yeah.
and then like, you know, so like, I mean, like Juicebox was around about that time, and there was all these people. Oh, but like, you know, like with the vinyl, and I'm like, man, if I can get my music to that DJ and to that DJ and to this DJ, I don't give a
Yeah.
hoot about these record labels. You know, like, oh, well, you need to do this tour now, or you need to do this, and like, have you done your thing? You know, I mean, like, I'd done like 2 albums because I was with Sony at the time,
Yep.
and I basically did like 2 albums, like put them on the shelves, waiting for them to, you know, like ask for the album, and like at the same time I was doing like this Juicebox stuff, and like, yeah, there's your album.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah,
get
yeah.
on with doing like this, experimenting with this, like, you know, I mean, like one of my goals was to see how low I could get like this bass to go, you know what I mean, and like how sharp I could get the break, and you know, I was kind of like by then like just experimenting with techniques on how to record on the tape,
Mm.
and then like basically then how to stereo image and like how to master, and like, you know, all these things were kind of, all these skills I was kind of basically like chiseling into this thing, and also loop kind of like a loop discipline, but learning how to loop, but like not just like regular kind of loops, but like loop within loops, and then like basically learning how to kind of build a tapestry of sounds, and how to, you know, get everything kind of working together. Like, you know, there would be like one break kind of like sounding like it was talking to this other break,
Mm.
basically because I'd use elements of each and kind of cross platform them together, and then EQ them in a way so they were, you know, and I was just going in, and I was going in and like in and in, and I didn't want any kind of distraction from record labels or
Yep.
anything like that, because it was just like a whole new sound, you know, using all these skills from, and like memories from like past, you know, like from listening to like jazz rock and like funk and like old hip hop, and you know, and so for me it was just like I had nothing to do with kind of pop success and all this. Like, you know, that was just like, that was 80s for me. That was like so 80s, like this whole Voodoo Ray, even, you know, like all that stuff, like, you know, all the acid house stuff for me was kind of, it was useful
Mm.
for learning how to shape like waveforms and stuff, but it was part of an 80s like kind of lesson, you know. It was like things that I'd basically got on board already, like, and how to, you know, learning how to manipulate breaks was what I was into in like from like 90, I think the first break kind of experiment thing I did was called Specific Hate, because it was like basically a play on the Pacific Hate,
Pacific State.
thing
Yeah, of course.
that
Yeah.
I'd done, and like basically so that was basically the first breakbeat thing that I'd done, and then like after that I basically didn't really look back. I was just like kind of going in on breaks, but then like since like the kind of early 90s to mid 90s, I started to experiment again with like, like synths and stuff like that, and like just in time for the whole soft synth thing to start happening. And then I started to like basically dive into the soft synths and like basically into like the digital audio workstation thing side of things. This company called Propeller Heads did this amazing program called Rebirth at the time. I think it was called Rebirth, and it was basically you could have a 303 and a 909 and 808 basically like in your computer kind of thing. And it was just like,
Blimey.
wow, I don't have to rig these things together anymore. I can, and like all this home and hiss and stuff like that, I can just have them directly. And then they made this program called Recycle, which meant that you could basically, instead of just key grouping like your little bits of breaks, you could split your break into slices and like play at any tempo, which meant that you could have like individual sound fonts from the drums and treat them separately, and then went down the rabbit hole with that, I'm afraid, and like, just like started to, and then like the whole thing kind of blew. I think Ableton kind of started a few years later. By then I was in Germany, but I kind of just learned to stick with what I had and like kind of use it as, I mean, like I kind of experimented a bit with some of the other digital audio workstations, but I think Reason basically just, it was like these kids who were like in Sweden who were locked away like half of the year because there's no sunlight. So like, I trusted them basically. What they did was like, it was like what we was doing in Manchester because it was pissing it down with rain most of the time. So I could appreciate like their what they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, you've obviously gone for your career in very quickly there. And I want to touch back on Jungle. And in particular 28 Gun Bad Boy. Released in 1992. A lot of people herald that as the start of Jungle, as the pusher for that. What was going through your mind with that as well? So obviously you said you did Specific Hate just after your involvement with 808 State and Pacific State. What brought you onto 28 Gun Bad Boy?
Basically it was at the time where we was like basically sampling bits and pieces from sound system like tapes and stuff like that, and basically like it was kind of, for me, like because like the whole 303 thing started to get a little bit pinky and perky, and like then the rave thing was kind of in a way heading in that direction. We started to use the same kind of noises, like I think there was that Alpha Juno sound that basically I think no one knew it was the Alpha Juno, so they just sampled it off a sample, and it just became so kind of played and like noisy and like, which is cool. But like I wanted to kind of stay with like the reggae vibe and like basically keep the key of the hip hop thing in there, and I think by then I'd basically collected, because I used to also collect like sound tapes and like samples of sound tapes, and I still do it now every now and again. I'll just spend like a whole kind of week just grabbing little bits and pieces and phrases of sounds and stuff like that. And I got this sound from like this sound tape, and like basically put it on a beat, and then like just from the spirit of like how he was saying, oh, 28 Gone Bad Boy, I built like a really kind of like one drop B line and then doubled it up to make it even lower. Everything was recorded on 2-inch tape back then, so I was basically just recording everything onto tape. I recorded it at 15 IPS, and then I would play it back at 30 IPS, and you would give this extra low bass, but it was doubled and all. So it was like a double bass, double kind of tone, but lowered. So it was like really, really, really deep. And I mean, I wasn't thinking at them times. I wasn't really thinking about the mastering process and like how it, you know, like basically if it's too low, it's just the needle's just going to jump off. So like, it was really hard. I remember as I started to attend the cut back then and all, and I just remember it at first being really hard for them to cut that bass because it was just so low. So I had to then take in consideration like more kind of compression and stuff on things and treating things a bit more because I used to like to just have everything raw. With I mean like I would put like reverb and effects and stuff like that, but like when it came to like compression and limiting and stuff like that, I never really pushed on that too much at first. But then when it came to putting stuff on vinyl, I remember I really had to kind of watch how I was kind of like putting like frequencies and stuff. So like I made the bass really tight on it. I remember it dropped, but it was still kind of, it was like, it was a really heavy, I mean, at first and all, it was like, I've got a version of it where it's just like there's a 4/4 drop in the background. So it's just got that and the snare like racing over the top and then like a break beat. And so it was just basically these things and then like the sample of like I can't remember what I based that on. The sample was based on a rave track. I can't remember exactly what the rave track was, but yeah, the sample was based on this rave track, and like the snare and stuff. Like I was basically kind of in a way mimicking like scientists, you know, like the sound system, with like the echoey kind of vibe, and like the dub was basically just kind of like, you know, close your eyes and you're in like a, you know, a Jashaka session kind of thing, just the red light and like the whoa.
Again, thinking about the dancers.
The whole from day one, even still till today. I mean, it's really hard now because, like, you know, there's not that many people that kind of express themselves that much to it. I mean, there's been so many different layers of kind of non-dancing to dance music. I mean, like people experiencing inebriance to dance music is different from like drummer and dancer, you know, feeding off each other. I mean, I still kind of have this passion to do that kind of thing. Been trying to get this gig together actually where I'm kind of in the center of the room and just like a load of old machines and whatever.
Live in session. Is it the live in session?
Similar to live in session, live in analog. Basically is like live in session is basically with two laptops. Basically running Reason and, you know, kind of performing certain things live. I mean, that actually gives me the accessibility to create like music that people will already know, like, you know, and still be able to kind of live kind of remix it and live edit it and take it to different places. But yeah, the analog thing kind of makes it so you can really kind of like get in there but it's, I mean, like the whole dance thing is kind of not as advanced as it used to be. You know, like if someone did a backflip in a club today, you know, you'd be like, oh my God.
You might get kicked out.
Yeah. Back then it was normal for you know, like a few acrobatics and the whole, just to show you the scale of how things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like a lot of I mean, like people would practice their dance moves like for weeks before they would, you know, and they would be challenges that would, imagine people from like Leeds and Birmingham, I think Bristol and like London and like all these places, and they would actually group together and like, like there would be a regular night where people would be dancing to all this stuff, but then middle of the night it would be like crunch time, and like they would have these challenges, and they'd have like this all nighters where it would be like Preston all nighter or something.
Yeah.
And it would be advertised like weeks before, and it would be a big thing, and like everyone would be there from all over the country. And yeah, the main thing for the dancers would be that like half an hour
showing up, showing your moves.
Yeah. Basically that you'd practiced. Yeah.
Wicked. So 28 Gun Bad Boy.
Yeah.
Was that very reflective of what society or your depiction of what society was back then?
In Manchester, yeah.
Yeah. Why in particular Manchester?
Because somehow there was a large kind of cache of firearms somehow in Manchester. I mean, there was like loads of people getting shot. Like half the people I went to school with are dead. Basically, they've heads blown off or chopped up with machetes. Or you could be in a pub and like a load of guys would come in with balaclavas and like basically just take everyone's like valuables and stuff like that.
Flipping out.
At one point, you had like the Special Patrol Group police like riding around Manchester like armed, like to basically make sure that everything was okay, and like so it was kind of a bit surreal, and that was round about that time where like there was like this summer of love. It was like the post part of that was like this kind of gang thing where they were fighting over different parts of Manchester, Salford, Cheetham Hill, Moss Side, and these places. They would have like you couldn't have like certain parties. You couldn't actually. By the end of it, you couldn't have like a jungle gig in Manchester. It was like I used to basically I'd go down to London and like hang out with Goldie and these guys and like Randall and them, because like Manchester was like a no-go zone. And then even then, like some of these kind of gangster guys from Manchester took it upon themselves to go to places like Coventry.
Yeah.
raid the dances. So it was like kind of following the jungle thing around a little bit. And yeah, so yeah, after a while, I kind of stopped kind of making stuff about like firearms music. So 28 Good Bad Boy was one of the tracks at first, but it kind of came out of the sound system thing. There was this bravado about like guns, because it was like in Jamaica it was like this big thing, like what kind of gun you was popping off kind of thing. And yeah, I suppose that kind of echoed over into the drum and bass thing, and like I was using a lot of that within the and part of me was like kind of like, wow, I couldn't do this kind of music when I was recording for Sony.
Yeah.
So it was kind of showing that independence in a way.
Yeah,
it was just like, I mean, like the first like breakbeat track I did actually was, I mean, I was very sample aware of what I could sample and use, and like if I was going to ask permission for certain things or whatever. When I was on Sony, when I was working with them, I was really aware of that. So it was like afterwards, it was just like this freedom where I could just sample anything and like just basically still make it my own. Still try to make it my own. Like like I would take a loop and like basically just chop it to bits and pieces. Even like some vocals. I think at one point I even did like this one track where I had Prince and Michael Jackson on the same track, basically, and like but like it was just put in there so obscure that it might have been like hard for people to, but like for me, I could hear it, and I'm like, look, like Prince and Michael Jackson on my track, my album. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So you say about obviously moving away from talking as much about guns and all those sort of things and stuff, and we move on to Black Secret technology.
Basically, yeah.
And I really like that there's one interview that you talk about it being the sounds of your ancestors and the fact that they were talking through drums.
Yeah.
Could you explain that whole quote? Because
basically, like, because what I started to do was just get like aware of, like, you know, so like, where's this music kind of coming from? Like, how come, like, I've got this kind of link to these people in Jamaica? Like, you know, we've kind of built this music, and it's still kind of like locked into them, and at the same time, it's locked into people in the US, and, like, you know, there's all these other, you know, so like, where's the cross point? Where's it all, you know? And it's like, Africa, wow, yeah. So I basically try to look at where the music was actually coming from, where's the rhythms were kind of like, because like what I discovered, like, they had certain types of rhythms. There's people I mean, there must have been so many different kind of organizations of people, but like in like Jamaica, there's these people called Maroons who had their own types of rhythms and stuff, which actually at one point, like, it was banned for them to or for people who were like slaves to actually bang a drum, because they could have been talking to the Maroons, I guess.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
But like, they had there's one rhythm called Nyabingi, and there's like, basically there's a Kumina rhythm too, which was basically, you know, this Kumina drum, which was basically for making these rhythms. And I was like, wow. And like, so like, they were talking with these rhythms, and I was like, that's really interesting. Like, so I wanted to use like these rhythms, and like, when in like some of the stuff that some of the breaks that I was using, I was basically trying to create like this, like, Naya rhythm and like Kumina rhythms with like using break beats, and like, it was just like a kind of internal kind of, like, you know, like a nod to like these people who were connected, you know. And then listening to stuff that was coming out of Brazil, and like, you know, there's some other places that I thought, wow, you know, they're very similar rhythms.
Percussive as well, very percussive music. Yeah.
Really, really similar rhythms. And it would be nice to know the story of like how they basically managed to kind of keep the kind of rhythms, or how they invented or they made these rhythms. And then from there I just started to look at all these other, like, you know, cultures that had their, you know, rhythms and things like that. And the Indian kind of classical music, how, you know, they actually really scaled like everything like to the microsecond, you might as well say. Like, the rhythms were kind of really tight, and like, you know, and then like started to look at the voodoo drums, obviously, and like from the Haitians, and like, you know, then there was different voodoo drums from Africa, and it's like, well, where's the transformation? Where did it transform, and how did it, you know? And then there was certain restrictions with people that they weren't allowed to drum. Like, how did they manage to continue, like, you know, the rhythm? How did they, you know, like, where did it change? You know, and I kind of like try to kind of grab like the where they crossed, where the cultures kind of crossed, because like for me, like, jungle was a cross culture, you know, and it was like, wow, it'd be nice to kind of grab energies from all these other different cross cultures kind of thing, and try and involve them in what I was doing at the time, you know. And you know, at the same time, I'm still thinking like jazz and stuff like that. How the hell did, you know, that kind of cross platform into jazz from like blues, or, you know, like, how did the blues kind of, you know, like where did they, you know, the tones actually, you know, like evolve from? How did that, you know, what did that used to sound like? You know, like, you know, like learning how, like, you know, they had like this ragtime stuff, and you know, like later on, and like, you know, there's like, you know, the whole kind of thing with like how they started to use this instrument that was from like the circus and the armies, and so, like, to, you know, like, so like that, how they manipulated the saxophone kind of thing, like, you know, in the end, and like it's like bloody hell, it's like, you know, they were using technology in a way back then to do something. And it's like, is that reminiscent of something else from the past? You know what I mean? Like how, you know, like, you know, how the hell did they get to that? There's, you know, there's still a lot of missing links. You know, if you know, when you hear some of the stuff, like, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, in Jamaica, say there's a real mixture. There's like Irish, there's Indian, there's Chinese, there's African, there's like folk kind of musics from all these different places, and they somehow they kind of gelled together there. You know, like it's really weird. Like there's a saying, like in like the actual motto of Jamaica is like out of many one, which is like if you listen to the original music from Jamaica, the traditional music, it's called mento, actually, before reggae, before ska.
And is that same sort of time as calypso?
Yeah. So it's like it sounds very calypso-ish.
Yeah.
Very, very calypso-ish. And they used, like, it was very bass orientated still too. They used, like, you know, like a thumb piano, but it was like a bass box. Okay. It was like this box they used to sit on, and they would have like maybe 3 or 4 strips of like metal, and like they would just twang it. And then somebody else would be on a kind of washing board, and like very simple acoustic kind of stuff, but like, you know, but like they created like this amazing music, and like obviously with the harmonies of voice and stuff like that, it kind of all, you know, and when you listen back and you think, wow, like, you know, they that came from something too, you know, for it to get to there. How did that get to be this kind of thing, you know? You know, so I mean, it would be, I would love to do kind of like become an anthropologist.
Yeah. Yeah, tough word.
And like basically trace back, because there was definitely times when like there was turning points, you know, and that's the points I'm interested in, actually, just like where it started to turn, where you know, where there's a collaboration of two kind of sounds together, kind of thing. Like, how did that happen? I mean, like with with soul, soul and mento kind of thing, kind of together, kind of in a way, or blues would create something else, you know, like, and there's all these different platforms that create these different kind of genres, for want of a better word. So yeah, I think I started around Black Secret Technology. I started to get interested in kind of this,
the journey of these sounds,
and you know, or the crossways where they actually cross together. I was like really interested in like the story of how they were crossing, and for me the drum was that. I mean, like the breakbeat drums is, I mean, it's actually infinite still. I mean, like it grows with the technology. I mean, like if I mean, like, I guess there is still like just the, you know, like the amen, and but like, you know, within that, you know, if you could use that as a guide, but like there's so many different twists and turns that you can use within that music. Anyway,
wonderful. No, that was really interesting.